Okay, good to see you. We're about to begin another 8-week module of our Gompa Rapsel class, Illuminating the Intention. So we're going to begin with some prayers and then a recitation of the Foundation of Good Qualities, as we usually do at the beginning of an 8-week session. So here we go. Sangye chorang soki chognam la changchu badu dagni kapsu chi dagi chunyen gipe sognam ki drola panchir sangye drupa shok. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly through the collections I create through listening to the Dharma, which also includes analyzing, contemplating, and meditating. Through the collections I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit migrating beings. Sangye chodang soki chognam la jangchu bardu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chunyen gipe sognam ki Trola Panchir Sangye Drupa Sho. And then a short mandala. By offering this ground, anointed with perfume and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon, visualized as a Buddha realm, may all migrators enjoy a pure realm. O holy and perfect pure Lamas, from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please send down a rain of vast and profound Dharma, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be trained, those to be subdued. Idham Guru Rana Mandalakam Niryatayami. Okay, so now we're going to recite and try to meditate on the meaning of the Foundation of All Good Qualities, the Yondan Shigirma that Lama Khapa composed. The foundation of all good qualities is the kind and perfect pure Guru. Correct devotion to him or her is the root of the path. By clearly seeing this and applying great effort, please bless me to rely on them with great respect. Understanding that the precious freedom of this rebirth is found only once, that's why it's called an auspicious moment, is greatly meaningful and is difficult to find again. Please bless me to generate a mind that unceasingly takes its essence both day and night. This life is as impermanent as a water bubble, remembering how quickly it decays and how quickly death comes. And after death, just like a shadow follows the body, the results of black and white karma follow. Finding firm and definite conviction in this, please bless me to be always careful to abandon even the slightest negativities and to accomplish all virtuous deeds. Seeking samsaric pleasure is the door to all suffering. We could say enjoying them is the door to all suffering. They are uncertain and cannot be relied upon. Recognizing these shortcomings, please bless me to generate the strong wish for the bliss of liberation. Led by this pure thought, mindfulness, alertness, and great caution arise. The root of the teaching is keeping the pratimoksha vows. Please bless me to accomplish this essential practice. just as I myself have fallen into the sea of samsara, we could say maybe am immersed in the sea of samsara. It's not as though we've fallen in recently or any time in the past. We've always been there. Just as I am immersed in the sea of samsara, so too all migrating beings. Please bless me to see this, train in supreme bodhicitta, and bear the responsibility of freeing migrating beings. Even if I develop mere bodhicitta, it's just wishing bodhicitta, but I don't practice the three types of morality, I will not achieve enlightenment. That means we have to have the engaging bodhicitta also. With my clear recognition of this, please bless me to practice the bodhisattva vows with great energy. Once I have pacified distractions to wrong objects and correctly analyzed the meaning of reality, please bless me to quickly generate within my mind stream the unified path of calm abiding and special insight. So where it says lukbe yula, so we say wrong objects, that can refer to, say, a wrong mental image, a wrong idea of emptiness that we're meditating on. Or it can be just also objects other than, right. It can be also objects other than what you're meant to be meditating on, like distracting objects. So once you've pacified distractions uh, due to these wrong objects or distracting objects, uh, and correctly analyze the meaning of reality, please bless me to generate quickly within my mind stream the unified path of calm abiding and special insight. Having then become a pure vessel by training in the general path, please bless me to be able to enter the holy gateway of the fortunate ones, the supreme Vajrayana, the Vajra path, the Tantra. And at that time, as the basis for accomplishing the two accomplishments, accomplishing the two siddhis, is to keep pure vows and samaya, and as I have become firmly convinced of this, please bless me to protect these vows and pledges like I protect my life. Then, having realized the importance of the two stages, the generation stage and the completion stage, which are the essence of the Vajrayana, by practicing with great energy, never giving up the 4 sessions, please bless me to realize the teachings of the Holy Guru. Like that, may the gurus who showed the noble path and my spiritual friends who practice it have long lives. Please bless me to pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. So one might say, the gurus who show the noble path and spiritual friends who practice it have long lives. So what about all the rest who don't practice? Maybe Lama Tsongkhapa is saying, it's okay that they have long lives, but most people who don't practice a spiritual path, to have long life means more time to create negative karma. Finally, dedication. In all my lives, may I never be separated from perfect gurus. May I enjoy the magnificent Dharma. And by completing the qualities of the stages and paths, may I quickly attain the state of Vajradhara. Okay. Thank you. There we are again. So we're going to, as usual, we're going to begin with a little actual meditation now. In theory, one is reciting or listening to those verses, one should try to develop a remembering consciousness of those various factors, taking refuge, generating bodhicitta, uh, and so forth. And then in reciting the foundation of good qualities, it's kind of like a glance meditation of the important points of the stages of the path. Uh, it is very, if you were familiar with the Lan Rim, that should give you an opportunity on each of those verses to pause and try to bring back that realization. If you have to analyze a little, uh, that's okay. And now we're going to actually do some meditation to do it a little more concentrated. So sit comfortably, relax your body, relax your mind. First of all, place your attention on the respiration in front of you. And then with mindfulness, once you have observed something, observe the breathing, keep that in mind with a mental factor mindfulness to the exclusion of other thoughts. Once you're aware of the breathing, you can more clearly see, if you apply some introspection, investigation, that the mind might be partially engaging other thought processes, thinking about something that's coming up or the past or observation about the present. Some of those can be due to distraction of the five outer senses, eyes, ears, and so forth. Some may just be within the mental consciousness itself, continuity of excitement or anger or jealousy or attachment or whatever, or worry. Let go of those and invest the energy that you were, using to support them. Invest that energy in the mindfulness of the breathing.
You're muted, Venerable.
Thank you. So my instruction didn't go very far. So bring your attention to your mental consciousness, maybe aiding that by imagining withdrawing your senses, your eye sense, your ear sense, nose, taste, and body sense to the heart chakra so that you're only paying attention to the mental consciousness, which you have to recognize at first by its contents. Emotions, delusions, positive states of mind, memories, plans, observations. All of these can arise and can reabsorb back into the consciousness without any obstruction from the mind itself. The mind has this kind of one meaning of its clear light quality, conventional clear light nature. We can develop all the good qualities that we have not yet developed. We can get rid of all of the faults that we exhibit. There's nothing from the side of our mind, there's nothing there that would preclude us from making great realizations. It's a matter of effort and understanding. You have to have correct understanding of the teachings and what we want to try to do to develop bodhicitta and renunciation and the right view of emptiness. But then you need to use effort and perseverance again and again. So this recognition of the clear light nature of the mind, the conventional clear light nature of the mind, should be accompanied by some joy. I'm not lost. I'm not a total washout. I'm not totally irredeemable. I can develop all the good qualities. And the fact that I can recognize this now is due to the fact that this moment I'm experiencing now, you say lifespan I'm experiencing now, is a life of leisure and endowment that the Buddha called an auspicious moment. So auspicious because everything has come together. The teachings exist. I've been exposed to them. I have some faith in them. There's a community of benefactors and like-minded practitioners. I'm free from the unfree states of being in the lower realms, as an animal, the hell being, were very difficult for the mind to even think of the Dharma for an instant. I can use this auspicious moment as I have in other times in multiple, numberless past lives when I've had such an opportunity, although very, very rarely, I've been distracted with worldly pursuits, family, friends, gain and loss, fame and fortune, and so forth. This time, I'm going to try to put more effort into using this to its best extent, which is to work for enlightenment for the sake of all mother sentient beings. Although I could work for my own liberation, which would be a noble and worthwhile path, the Buddha said that those of his followers who were intelligent, more intelligent, should not be satisfied with his Hinayana teachings, his lesser vehicle teachings, which he himself gave, but they should strive for enlightenment by developing bodhicitta. It's incredibly rare state of mind that wishes to achieve enlightenment out of the wish to alleviate the suffering of all sentient beings. To achieve enlightenment itself just for our own ends is not called bodhicitta. It has to be preceded by, modified by the wish to alleviate the suffering of sentient beings, to place them into everlasting blissful happiness. In order to do that, we have to accumulate the two collections, the collection of merit and the collection of wisdom, which are explained in the Prajnaparamita Sutras, but as explained by Nagarjuna in his fundamental wisdom, expanded upon by Buddhapalita and Aryadeva and so forth, especially Chandrakirti in his entry to the middle way, or supplement to the middle way, the Madhyamaka which Lama Tsong centuries later wrote this sub-commentary, you might say, the Khapa Rapsel, illuminating the intention. So this explains the methods to achieve, to accumulate merit and wisdom. Mainly, we've been talking about wisdom recently, but we also talk about merit. So think I'm going to participate today as the subject matter will help me to achieve this goal of achieving enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings. I'm going to listen, contemplate, and meditate as the teaching is going on, hopefully without distractions, in order to eventually achieve enlightenment, maybe quickly achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. That's my reason for participating in the class. Okay, there you go. Bring your attention back to the present. How are we doing? Hi, Dawn. Have you recovered from the birthday party?
98% recovered.
What was it? Stomach? Was it a flu or something?
Upper chest,
Oh,
congestion
okay.
and all that.
Okay, probably brought on by being with a bunch of kids or something.
Yes, thank you for asking.
So Mintu is here also. Any observations about our meditation at the beginning, our motivation? I ask occasionally to see. Stephen, yeah. What do you think?
Thanks for asking, Venerable George. I was just struck by the instruction you gave towards the beginning to place the attention at the heart chakra to observe the mental continuum. Is that given to kind of help with the withdrawal of the senses? Because all of our senses, 4 or 5 of them, are up here in our head.
Yeah, yeah. There are 5 in our head, but the fifth one also is in the rest of our body also. Yeah, Lama Zopa Rinpoche once asked why the sense of I seemed to be at the heart. In some cultures, when you say I, they point to the head, but in many cultures, I can't get my camera, they say, me, who's says who? Says me, pointing to your heart. And Rinpoche asked, and the people were quiet. I ventured to say that's where the subtlemost mind and wind reside. And Rinpoche said that was a good explanation. So that's one reason. And as you say, during the dissolution of the elements at the time of death or at the time of sleep, the airs, the winds that act as a support for the I consciousness, that starts to retreat back toward the heart chakra. It doesn't have to go all the way there, but in going away from the I organ, the I faculty, the I consciousness cannot function, because for I consciousness to function, there have to be those three conditions, right? There has to be an object condition and what do they call it? The faculty condition and so forth. So same thing with the ear consciousness. As you begin to imagine withdrawing those back to the heart chakra, you won't be as likely to be distracted by sounds or smells or tastes or, the feeling in your body. I think that's the sense of that. Does that satisfy your question, Stephen?
Yeah, thank you, Venerable George.
Yeah, yeah. Anyone else have a thought?
I'd
Yeah.
just like to get the page numbers we're on in the two texts.
Oh, yeah. Okay. We're still a little bit before that, but
Okay.
the FPMT text, it's page 142. And in Thupten Jinpa's written text, it's 259. 142 in FPMT and 259 in Jinpa's text. It's the section called The Merits of Negation. But I'm going to read something first before we begin that.
I think
Katie?
Katie, yeah, sorry, I was going to say Katie had a question.
Yeah, Katie.
Thank you. Based on what you just said, then the withdrawal of the senses drawing to the heart, how does this kind of relate to the growing pliability that we hope to attain with our shamatha and vipassana meditations? Like
The growing what?
pliability,
Pliability, pliancy, physical.
pliancy, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
So generally pliancy is a usability of the body and mind. And right now, until we develop tranquil abiding, we are hindered because of the impurity of the airs and so forth. When you develop single-pointed concentration, the winds are not moving in the side channels so much, because the movement in the channels usually is associated with conceptualizing thoughts, planning and thinking and wishing and feeling depressed or feeling elated or whatever, all of the different kinds of thoughts. So when you have single-pointed concentration and the winds are not moving through the side channels, they are purified in a certain sense. I can't remember the details, and they become the mind, the mental consciousness becomes more able to do whatever you want, and eventually the body also to whatever capability the body has. There's no laziness and no hesitancy and so forth. But that is related with developing single-pointed concentration. Here we're just beginning to try to achieve concentration. And so as pliancy is a result of getting close to concentration, the higher levels of the various levels of achieving shine, of tranquil abiding. that doesn't enter, that kind of pliancy doesn't enter into our equation right now, into our observation right now, other than the fact that your mind should become a little bit more capable of, analyzing and so forth as it's more concentrated like that. Okay. So in the FPMT page 142, Sean, I noticed you put a note up there. Okay. Anyone else have a thought? So I wanted to read, over the many months that we've been doing this, I've read sometimes the motivation that Geshe Zopa gave in the mornings. In the morning class, in the summers, we would always have a class in the morning, class in the afternoon. The morning class would be a little more elaborate. We would do the Yonten Shir Gyurma as we do at the beginning of our 8 sessions, and some other prayers. And then Geshe would lead a motivation. So I'm going to read one from July 23rd, 2002 in the morning. He also quoted the same verse in August 6th, 2004. So it's one of the verses from the Lama Tsongkhapa's Praise to Dependent Arising, Tendel Toba. So Tendel Toba was written in Tibetan, so it doesn't have an official Sanskrit name, but I think it's some editions. Maybe Paul, do you know? Is it sometimes it has the title in Sanskrit?
Something like the Pratitya Samutpada Stotra or something like that.
Yeah. But it doesn't. It's not meant to be that it was found amongst Sanskrit books.
Mm.
So this particular verse says, "Zepa kunle sungini, zepa chokyen te yangni deni yinchir kebayi dile sange jeden." So what this means, Zepa, the first line says, Zepa kunle. So among all Zepa, when we talk about Zepa, when we talk about the deeds of the Buddha, various activities of the Buddha, we talk about the 12 deeds and other kinds of activities, and we make prayers that we might accomplish the deeds, the activities of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So amongst all of the deeds, Zepa kunle, sungini, Zepa chokyen. So among all of those, the deed of speech is supreme. So there are bodily deeds, the Buddha appearing and just sitting, and maybe, you emulating their activities, watching them and so forth. All of those are good. Those are physical deeds. Of course, the mental deeds of the Buddhas are incalculable, but the supreme of all of the activity of the Buddha is his or her teaching. So I'll read you Thupten Jinpa's translation of this verse. This is verse 52. If you happen to have other translations of the Praise to the Dependent Arising by Lama Tsongkhapa, this is verse 52. Jinpa's translation says, "Of all your deeds, your speech is supreme. Within that, too, even within that, is this very speech," which is referring to the speech about emptiness and dependent arising. "So the wise should remember the Buddha through this." And then he has in brackets, teaching of dependent origination. Okay, so Geshe Zopa said, I'll kind of read and sometimes paraphrase what he's saying. Sometimes it's kind of like you almost need it's like people that listen to Lama Zopa Rinpoche, they said sometimes they needed to have a translator. If they hadn't heard Lama Zopa for many times, there would have to be someone in the group who was familiar with Rinpoche's speech to translate it to them. The same way with Jongla Rata Rinpoche's English when he taught in New York City. one of his students would then say it again in kind of in New York idiom or something like that. So anyway, Geshe-la said, so that verse means the Buddhas have many deeds for the benefit of sentient beings. There are the 12 deeds and so forth, many kinds of deeds for helping sentient beings. But among them, the highest, the best deed is the speech, teaching. The teaching is the best. How many Buddhas come and how many deeds are done, but the pure teachings is how you liberate sentient beings from their misery, from their suffering, from their temporary sufferings and so forth to reach the final goal. Everyone is seeking for that purpose, the direct pure teaching. That is the best one. So therefore, best speech is the highest of the deeds. And then the next part of that verse says, Teyang ni deni yinchir. So that means among the teachings, the speech, there are many different teachings. Teaching about the beginning of the path in the Lan Rim, all the way up to the end state of enlightenment. But among those teachings, so among the deeds of the Buddha, speech is supreme. Among the speech of the Buddha, that which is supreme is the teachings of emptiness, shunyata, dependent origination. Everything is dependently existent. There is nothing that exists ultimately or inherently. That kind of teaching clearly showing many different ways, showing it in many different ways. So therefore, without this, there is no final freedom, no final emancipation. Both the Hinayana and the Mahayana emancipation, the final achievement, is to get rid of ignorance, which is the root of samsara. The direct antidote of that is the realization of emptiness. So that's why the teaching on emptiness is supreme. Shunyata has to be clearly explained. So that is by dependent origination. With that, showing shunyata. So shunyata and dependent origination having this relationship of indicating the other. This is the subject, showing that among speech is the highest speech. And then the next lines, it said, so the wise should remember the Buddha through this teaching of dependent origination. Geshe-la said, those wise beings, any wise beings, seeing that great kindness, the greatness of the Buddha, his teaching, and this way, you have to be mindful of the Buddha with Jedang, Jeden, Jo. Jo is a instrumental, is a imperative. You should do this. Do the Sangye gi Jesu Dempa. So I think Nadine, do you remember the three mindfulnesses? What was the book that you had mentioned?
Do you mean the Song of Four Mindfulnesses?
Oh, Song of the Four Mindfulnesses, right? So one of them is
Yes.
being mindful of the Buddha. And
Yes.
so this is talking about that. So you have to do the Sangye Jesu Dempa. You have to have the mindfulness of Buddha, recollection of Buddha. Usually you have three recollections. Usually always doing Sangye Jesu Dempa, Chu Jesu Dempa, Gendun Jesu Dempa, remembering the three jewels. So that of the four mindfulnesses, I think maybe there's a different enumeration there, but generally when we talk about Jesu Dempa, recollection or mindfulness, we're talking about recollection of the Buddha, remembering the Buddha's qualities, remembering the Dharma, remembering the Sangha and their qualities and so forth. Their virtues, their highest worth, their highest worthy, praiseworthy kind of qualities, then that way respecting the Buddha. That is Jesudempa, that is remembering or recollection. The Buddhas are generally perfect. The quality of the perfection of the body, the perfection of the speech, perfection of the mental quality, many thinking that way to honor and respect like that. But this is the highest way, also from Sangye Jesudempa kind, that Buddha, no teacher outside of Buddhas, no outside teachings are like this. It is the highest teaching. So therefore, thinking that way is the mindfulness of the Buddha, remembering and in that way honoring and respecting so much. So when you think about the recollection of Buddha, thinking about his kindness and teaching, the three countless eons of effort that went into achieving enlightenment for the sake of teaching sentient beings, teaching me. So Khapa means those wise beings, otherwise wise beings. So we are all kind of Khapa, mostly Khapa. I'm joking, Geshe-la said. Then he said, maybe not joking, not joking. Otherwise, what is the Buddha talking? There is no form, zukme, no sound, no smell. What is he, what kind of crazy thing is he saying? What is that talking, teaching? The wise beings who understand the value of analyzing the words of the Buddha, how this is one of the great worthy and for the benefit of sentient beings, this is the highest medicine. Seeing that way all the time, the memory of the Buddha or faith in the Buddhist, trust in the Buddha, that way, this is one of the main things. Okay, and so related with that is a famous verse that I've mentioned several times. At the end of Bodhisattva Charyavatara, the last chapter is titled what? Do any of you know what's the last chapter? Paul, do you know?
It's the dedication, chapter
Dedication.
10.
And as you go through that, the 57th verse, well, I think the 55th is the one that His Holiness often mentions, that as long as cyclic existence exists, as long as sentient beings exist, I will remain in order to alleviate their suffering. You've probably heard His Holiness mention that. I think that's verse 55 or so. So this is verse 57. There's only one more verse after this in the Bodhisattva Charyavatara. And this is one of Geshe Zopa's favorite ones, and what he was referring to here when he said the highest medicine, the teachings, the highest medicine. So this is from the translation by Steve Batchelor. You can find other translations. May the teachings, which are the sole medicine to alleviate suffering and the origin of every joy, be materially supported and honored and abide for a very long time. Geshe Zopa used to be very fond of that verse when we would be doing, some kind of prostrations to the scripture, prostrations or mandala offerings or something like that. Geshe-la, as he was getting older and could only do some activities, he would circumambulate the temple, because within the temple there were all of the Kangyur and Tengyur, all of the texts representing the teachings of the Buddha. And he felt that was, as the speech, as is the highest, the teachings are the highest, the most beneficial deed of the Buddha, that one, in circumambulating that, one creates more merit and respects that more. So I wanted to share that with you. One of the motivations that Geshe Zopa gave in the mornings. Okay, how are we doing? We okay? Amy Krantz has just joined on. Good to see you. Okay, so we're on, as Don had inquired earlier, we're on page 259 in Jimpa's text, the written text, and in the FPMT we're on page 142, the FPMT translation. Jeremy, do you have the FPMT translation also? Maybe in Australia you didn't get. Did you notice that?
Yes, yes, thank you. I have it. Thank
Okay,
you.
okay, good. So for those who are using electronic, like Diana, who will probably be listening this on a recording, this is, you can search for The Merits of Negation. That's the title here in the 12th section of Jimpa's book. But this is just referring to the next line after that, the merits of refuting arising from other. So in the Tibetan text, it just says, it doesn't say that, it says Sumbani. So this is the merits of refuting arising from others, to refute other arising, right? We've refuted arising from self already, and now we're still on the section of refuting arising from something which is inherently other than you. So this is the third section in various topics about that, the merits of refuting other arising. Okay. So Jimpa's text says, his translation is, a system that, as explained above, propounds the absence of real entity in the form of intrinsic existence, has the merit of not falling into the extremes of eternalism and nihilism, because it affirms dependent origination that is free from eternalism and annihilationism. Venerable Jones' translation, the FPMT translation, says, therefore, with regard to the way it is explained above, what we've just finished, the things do not inherently exist like that. In order to indicate the quality of not falling into the extremes of permanence and annihilation, Jimpa says the extremes of eternalism and nihilism. Venerable Jones says permanence and annihilation, permanence instead of eternalism, nihilism, annihilation instead of nihilism. There is the following explanation. Not falling into the extremes of permanence and annihilation by means of establishing dependent arising. So in other words, when you refute inherent production from other, let's say, in particular, one of the things that will necessarily be apparent is that the causes and their results are related in a dependent way. The result depends on the cause. Actually, the cause depends on the result also. So anything that has a dependence on something other, can that be inherently existent? Richard? Why not? What's the reason?
I'm not sure if that's a trick question, because it's dependent on the other thing, because it's not the same, because it's different, because if it were not dependent on the cause, it couldn't possibly, it's just.
Oh, yeah. Okay. You got the right idea. So if something is inherently existent, it does not depend on anything else. It exists from its own side without dependence on anything else, whether another factor or you're imputing upon a basis of designation. It doesn't depend on anything if it were inherently existent. So if you start from the other side, if you say that things are dependently related, they can't be inherently existent.
Right.
And here, this is said to have the great merit, because it's talking about the merit of negation, the great merit or the great feature, quality of not falling into the two extremes. So usually in Tibetan, we say takche. So tak, one way you can translate tak is, it's the same word as permanence. Takpa can mean permanent. Like for instance, what's the phrase for impermanent? Any of you know? Louise knows.
Mitapa.
Mitakpa.
Takpa, right? Everyone say, oh, takpa, don't worry, everything's impermanent. So takpa means permanent. But it also here, when you're talking about the two extremes, Mikhail, do you have a preference for what takpa means when you talk about the two extremes?
I'm using permanence, yeah.
Permanent, yeah. Permanent has the connotation of just being regular permanence. Here, Jimpa translates it as eternalism. So what would that refer to? So the two kind of mistakes that you can make in considering phenomena is that you consider that they're inherently existent, they're truly existent. Therefore, they have a certain kind of continuity that can't be broken. That's kind of the implication of that. One of the implications of something being, if something were to be inherently existent, I phrase it that way because nothing is inherently existent. If inherent existence existed for anything, that thing would be permanent. So permanent is a justifiable way. Paul, what about the virtues of translating it as eternalism or something else?
I mean, I guess. I mean, I always think of eternalism and nihilism as sort of more philosophical stances than a state of existence. So I tend to go with permanence and
Annihilation.
annihilation, yeah.
Okay, so what the annihilation means is that if you were to underestimate the qualities, thinking that because they don't inherently exist, they don't exist at all, or they lack a certain kind of conventional reality, validity, that would be what is kind of, maybe this sounds like a little bit over the top, annihilationism or an annihilation. So chepa means cutting off. So takche, these are the two extremes. So let's go a little bit further. So to demonstrate this, Chimpa says, there is verse 633. And interestingly, in some of I think, Paul, in your Majjhimika Reader and in other places, this is one of the verses you can't find many translations of. It jumps from 632 to 634 in your Majjhimika Reader. It doesn't talk about this, nor does it talk about the commentary to it. You can't find this explained very much, but this is an important verse. And this is the verse that's talking about the merits. So it says, because the sprout is no other than the seed, no other than the seed. Jones says, not other than the seed. No other than the seed sounds like that it is the seed, isn't it? Doesn't it? But if it's not other than the seed, that doesn't say it is the seed itself. I think not might be a better translation there. Anyway, because the sprout is no other than the seed, there is no extinction of the seed at the time of the sprout. Because the sprout is not other than the seed, there is no extinction of the seed at the time of the sprout. And because the sprout and seed are not identical, it cannot be said that the seed exists when the sprout is there. So obviously that takes some thinking. What is Chandrakirti getting at here? Sean, do you have some question here?
Well, I was just wondering if both of those words, eternalism and permanence, are they not missing the point, because there are permanent phenomenon and there are eternal phenomena.
Right. So for instance, when people ask the Buddha these 14 questions, and in other times they ask a certain subset of them, after death, does the Buddha continue or does the Buddha disappear? So if they said it that way, what would the thought that the Buddha, ended at the time of death, that the Buddha ended, what kind of extreme would that be?
Nihilist.
Pardon?
The annihilist. Annihilation.
Annihilation or nihilism or something like that. As Paul is saying, the words nihilism and so forth, they have certain philosophical meanings separately, so you can get mixed up. Here, that would be an extreme that's extremely deprecating the existence of the Buddha, saying that the Buddha doesn't exist after death. But to say that the Buddha continues to exist after death, the implication that the person who's speaking that is making, the implication that they have is that the Buddha will always continue, sort of like in a eternal way or in a permanent way. So that's kind of related with that. Okay, how are we doing? Amy, how are you doing? You okay? Okay. There you go.
Using me.
Okay. So verse 633. So let's just go a little bit back so get some background. When you talk about a seed giving rise to a sprout, when the sprout has actually come, can you say the seed is still existing? What do you think? Say, Steve? Oh, Amy says no. Okay. That's something to keep in mind. Stephen, what do you say?
Yeah, I agree with Amy. No.
Why not?
Well, because you can't observe it.
Well, can't you observe some kind of like shell-like, like the thing that was encrusting the seed and so forth? Is that the seed?
No, it's not the seed.
Why not?
Maybe the remnants of the seed, but it can't resprout.
Yeah, that's true. That's not a seed. It wasn't a seed when the seed was there, the sort of outer coating. What the substance of the seed that becomes the sprout is kind of like the continuity of the seed at that point. Usually we don't think so much about the continuity of the seed. Usually in normal parlance, we say that when the sprout arises, the seed is destroyed. But the question is the seed destroyed? When is the seed destroyed? Only at that interface between the last moment of the seed and the first moment of the sprout? We'd addressed this earlier when we were talking about the analogy of the scale. Do you remember? The ceasing and so forth. So as the seed is approaching destruction, it's still existing. The sprout is approaching, what's the word? Approaching
Production.
production, maturation. So there, from the Prasangika point of view, both can be taking place at the same time, and that there is a continuum of the seed, although the seed is gone. Once the sprout is actually produced, the seed is gone, or destroyed, but there is still a continuity of something about the seed that exists in the sprout. Say, for instance, when the sprout is very just fresh, almost it looks like the structure of the seed, or in the last moments of the seed, you almost see the structure of the sprout. It seems like you see the structure of the sprout. So these two are what are being talked about here, and other kinds of causal phenomena like this. Because the sprout is not other than the seed, there is no extinction of the seed at the time of the sprout. So what would that mean? Extinction means destruction, total destruction of the seed, in the sense of, well, let's see, here it's what they're translating as extinction is zikpa. Mikhail, have you run across the word shikpa? What was I saying? Zikpa. Shikpa.
Destruction, destroy.
Yeah, it can mean that. It is a particular kind of state of when something, like say, for instance, the last moment of an action, like when you're offering. I always start off with killing. You're offering, the last moment of that, you're no longer offering, right? The action of offering has ceased or been destroyed, but it still continues on some karmic ability. So that last moment of an action is called its shikpa, its destruction. But from the Prasangika point of view, from other people's point of view, there's nothing that exists after that. That's just the end of the continuum of the giving, right?
Venerable George, is that the same like disintegratedness word we come across?
Yes, I think some people translate that as disintegratedness, right? So here we're encountering it. Maybe we encountered it earlier, but here we're encountering it again. Let's go back to Jimpa, what Jimpa says here. Because the sprout is not other than the seed, there is no extinction, there's no shikpa of the seed at the time of the sprout. So what would that mean? That would mean that there is something that the sprout has not totally been annihilated and has no results any longer. If the sprout, say, because the sprout is not other than the seed, that means not inherently other than the seed. So you've got the sprout, got the seed. If they were inherently other, the existence of the sprout would have no influence on this, on the seed ceasing. It could just cease. But because they're not other, because they're not inherently other, the seed and the sprout, they exist, the way that they actually exist is in conventionally is in terms of dependent origination. Because the sprout is not other than the seed, not inherently other, there is no extinction of the seed at the time of the sprout. So the seed has not reached this kind of state of disintegratedness or shikpa. And because the sprout and the seed are not identical, say the first one was because they're not other, they're not inherently other. If two things exist, they either have to be identical or other, right? They have to be the same or other. So if the seed and the sprout are not other, then the other possibility would be that they would have to be identical. Because the sprout and the seed are not identical either, it cannot be said that the seed exists when the sprout is there, because they're not identical. If they were identical, then you could say that whatever continuity of the seed, that the seed was still there, but the seed is not there. Somehow the seed was destroyed, but its continuity continues. Okay, let's see what the commentary says. Is it making sense so far? Are we following? Amy, did we throw you in the deep end? Okay, good. That's good. Snehi, do you want to say, want to take a break, or let's
Yeah,
wait?
I was just wondering if you want to do that before diving into the commentary.
No, I'm going to introduce the commentary a little bit, because
Okay.
this is quite an important thing. If you understand these various topics, like we mentioned before about the sides of a scale, while one side is going up, the other is going down, and so forth. That's the same kind of process that's going on here. The seed is approaching destruction, and the sprout, at the same time, the sprout is approaching production, destruction and production. So here, the Thupten Jinpa's translation of Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary. So this is Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary is also based on Chandrakirti. If the sprout were intrinsically other than the seed, right? The root verse just says is not other than the seed, but that means inherently or intrinsically other. If the sprout were intrinsically other than the seed, which it's not, the seed and the sprout could not be cause and effect, could not be cause and its effect, right? Makes sense? If they were intrinsically, inherently other. Why is that? Because if they were intrinsically other, they would have no relationship with one another, right? Not just being other, like two kitty cats that are born in the same litter. They're other than one another, but they're not intrinsically other, right? Okay, if the sprout were intrinsically other than the seed and the sprout could not be cause and its effect. In that case, in that event, the seed's continuum would certainly cease once the sprout exists. A Venerable Joan translated, without doubt, the continuity of the seed would be interrupted. The continuity of the seed, Jimpa said, what? A seed's continuum, continuity continuum, would certainly cease once the sprout exists. The actual verse, oh, no, okay, I'll finish that. I'll go back to that later. So if the sprout were intrinsically other than the seed and the sprout could not be cause and its effect. In that event, in that case, the seed's continuum would certainly cease once the sprout exists. Why is that? Once the sprout exists, if it's inherently other than the seed, here it says it would doubtlessly cease. Why would the continuity of the seeds necessarily cease if they're inherently other?
That's exactly the question I had.
Okay.
Because they would have to be unrelated, right?
If they're inherently other,
Maybe no relationship.
there would be no relationship, yeah.
But why would it have to cease though? It seems like if
That's
it was
what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm asking, right?
if it was inherently existing, it should always exist, right?
Yeah, yeah. But it's when it says when the seed has ceased, right? How did it go
Well,
here?
why would an inherently existing seed cease?
Hold on, hold on. If the sprout were intrinsically other than the seed and the sprout could not be cause and its effect. That's one thing. And two, in that case, the seed's continuum would certainly cease once the sprout exists. Because if the seed existed at the time of the sprout, they would have to be they would they would have to be identical at that time. No? Oh no. Okay, Sneh, what do you say?
I'm thinking what Sean was saying, like if you have a seed that's inherently existent, it should just stay a seed forever.
Which is why it would have to be the same as the sprout.
Yeah, but they're not the same.
But this is saying if they were different, if you start with the premise that the seed and the sprout are intrinsically other, then they have no relationship to each other.
Right.
Yeah, in that case,
So
a
then
seed should never stop existing.
stop being a seed.
Right. Let's see
I
here.
think it may be wrong here, but I think if the phrase "in that event" refers to the event where the seed is the cause of the sprout.
Sure, that makes sense.
Say again.
So if you read, instead of "in that event," if you say, if there was a cause and effect between the seed and the sprout, the seed's continuum would certainly cease once the sprout exists.
Right. Okay, that's a good reading.
That-
So
That's
that
the way that I'm reading that sentence.
that gives meaning to the first phrase there in that event, in that case. So in the case that they were cause and result. So generally, when we talk about cause and result, the cause precedes the result, and once the result is present, the cause no longer exists as a cause of that. Right? It has reached its fruition. Okay, let's see if we can find some more meaning here. Let me go back to Jimpa's translation. So if the sprout were intrinsically other than the seed and the sprout could not be cause and its effect. In that case, if they were cause and effect, the seed's continuum would certainly cease once the sprout exists. Is that more comfortable now?
Very comfortable.
The seed would totally, would certainly cease. The seed and the sprout would be totally unrelated. And so, even if the sprout were present, this would not in any way preserve the lineage of the seed. Okay, what's he talking about here? Remember when I said before we got to the verse, I said, think of the general situation. The seed is somehow eventually becoming the sprout. When the sprout is there, the seed is no longer said to exist. Whatever shell casings of the seed that are lying around are not the seed. The seed has disappeared, and now the sprout is there. So there's two possibilities. Either the seed and the sprout are identical, so that when the sprout is there, the seed is still there in the sprout, or they're different, inherently different. They have no relationship. So here, the continuum would certainly cease once the sprout exists. The seed and the sprout would be totally unrelated. And so even if the sprout were present, this would not in any way preserve the lineage of the seed. So this particular sentence, very, very convoluted in Tibetan. We're looking like maybe three negative, not a double negative, like a triple negative sort of thing. So Jimpa's done pretty well here when he's talking about preserve the lineage of the seed. Venerable Joan translated this as if a sprout were an inherently existent other than the seed, because the two, seed and sprout, would be unsuitable as cause and result, the sprout being existent, or you could translate that as while the sprout is existing, without doubt, the continuity of the seed would be interrupted. The continuity of the seed would be interrupted. So when you talk about the continuity of the seed, every moment the seed is still existing, there is a continuity of the seed, right? Like when we talk about mind stream, there is a continuity of something, a stream of it, like a clay pot. It has its own continuum. Let me say continuum. It has its own continuum. So the continuum or the continuity of the seed would be interrupted. This is because, and maybe I should read Jimpa's part of that first. To illustrate, let's say, the seed and the sprout would be totally unrelated, and so even if the sprout were present, this would not in any way preserve the lineage of the seed. Or as Jones said, let's see here, the sprout being existent, without doubt, the continuity of the seed would be interrupted. This is because though seed and sprout, having become interrupted, unrelated, or in other words, being unrelated, although the sprout exists, it does not contribute to the non-interruption of the continuity of this type of seed. That's the phrase that I was talking. It does not contribute to the non-interruption of the continuity of this type of seed. What did Jimpa say? I think he may have left off this sentence. Is that right, Paul? Does
No,
it look?
it does not in any way preserve the lineage of the seed.
Yeah,
Venerable George is
This would not in any way preserve the lineage of the seed.
Where is that?
In Jinpa, in the middle of the paragraph.
The third sentence.
Yeah, Jimpa doesn't translate the doubt phrase, the Tetso Mebar, without a doubt. He doesn't translate that literally.
Yeah, he says certainly.
He just says certainly.
Right. Well, which, he could argue that's a translation of without doubt, doubtlessly. So the third sentence you said, Mikhail?
Yeah, the seed and the sprout would be totally unrelated. And
Yeah.
so even if the sprout were present, this would not in any way preserve the lineage of the seed.
Okay, I missed that. Yeah, this would not in any way preserve the lineage of the seed. So Joan is translating there, it does not contribute to the non-interruption of the continuity of the type of seed, which is more literally correct, but maybe doesn't give the flavor. So what does that mean? This would not in any way preserve the lineage of the seed.
Doesn't it simply mean they have nothing to do with each other?
Right. They have nothing to do with other. So although the seed has, in this scenario, although the seed now is destroyed, and you're hoping to see there's some kind of continuity afterwards, the presence of the sprout couldn't act as that couldn't contribute to that, couldn't be that or contribute to that continuity because they're totally unrelated. Nadine, you have a thought?
Yes, would it be correct to say the concept of lineage or continuity would be unreasonable or absurd if things were inherently different?
Right, right. If they were inherently different, you couldn't have a continuity of things. Right off the bat, right, like that. Good. So let's go a little bit further, and then we're going to go back over it again.
How do you even say that something that's inherently existing stops ceasing? Is
Yeah.
that not also a flaw?
So you can say anything, you can think anything, you can think about the red-tipped horns of a rabbit, or the son of a barren woman's part-time job. Son of a barren woman doesn't exist, so definitely his part-time job doesn't exist. So they're just talking hypothetically. If that were the case, okay.
Venerable George, did you want to take that break? Or
So I'm getting pressed here to take break. Okay, let's take break. I will leave my microphone on, and if anyone wants to debate with one another, Amy needs some back. Okay, we had a couple of good exchanges there during the break. How are you doing? Anyone have a lingering question up till now? How are we doing? Making sense. So what's good is, say, for instance, when teachings like this are given, and other teachings, maybe on Tantra or Lama Chopa or something like this, there are different kinds of techniques. Once the whole subject will be explained once rapidly, then it will be explained in detail on another day, and then another day combination of the two, and then a very short summary of them, the different ways of teaching like that. So you yourself should go back. We're going through this. You may have prepared, hopefully you've prepared reading a little bit, even though it was perplexing. So now, having heard some explanation, go back in your own study and review that. And on Monday, when we have discussion class, we can go over it in another way, so that you can start to see it in different ways like that, both in extensive and the essence of it and so forth. Okay, so let's continue here. To illustrate, the presence of a cow-like beast in no way ensures the non-cessation of a cow's lineage after death. Oh boy. How did Joan translate this?
Isn't that just saying the same thing?
Yeah. This is using an example. It says, she wrote, oxen having died, the existence of bamen, cattle, not contributing to the non-interruption of the continuity of type of the oxen. Yeah, that's just so many convoluted things there. So what is it saying? First of all, what is bamen? Do you know what bamen means, Paul?
I mean, obviously something related to a cow. I mean, ba is cow in general, because
Yeah,
it's ba men and ba long.
right. So usually when you say balang, that's a general word that can mean cattle in general.
Mm.
So in that sense, sometimes people say the ba represents the cows and the lang represents what we say bulls, right? Is that the male?
Yeah.
When we say in the mandala offering, what are you offering? Koro Rinpoche, Norbu Rinpoche, Sumo Rinpoche, Longpo Rinpoche, Longpo Rinpoche,
Mm.
Tacho Rinpoche, Supreme Horse. So that's Supreme Elephant. So Longpo means elephant. That's not the same as Balang,
Right.
the Lang. So here it says, in the Tibetan, it says Bamin. So both translators here, and also in Jeffrey Hopkins' dictionary, or let's say the University of Wisconsin online dictionary. Excuse me again, University of Virginia online dictionary, which Paul you're familiar with. It has all of the possible translations according to different translators. There it has one by Jeffrey that says some cow like is Gael or something like this, which in Sanskrit does mean some kind of something similar to a cow.
I think it's like a hybrid, like that's like an ox and a cow. So it's like or a cross. What's the one that's like a cross between a cow and a yak, right? There's another one of
So
those.
yeah,
Yeah,
so
so exactly. I think that's the distinction they're making.
So
But
that's not according to Geshe Zopa, that's not the case at all because here we don't have the Sanskrit to compare it with. We have the Sanskrit of the Karikas of Madhyamaka and we have the Sanskrit of the Bhasham, the auto commentary, from the first to the fifth to the end of the fifth Bhumi. Paul, do you know of any actual sixth chapter
There is a complete manuscript in China, and Anne
No, I
MacDonald
mean,
and Aunt MacDonald is actually translating the whole thing, so she has it.
okay, so it's still not available to
Still not
us.
available to
So we
us.
can't see whether it's got. When Geshe Zopa taught this, he said, when he was talking about Bamen, he said, he didn't even hesitate. He said, a non-cow. So what does that come from? Remember when we talk about uh, Dokpa, the concept of isolate. One way of understanding it is the opposite of say the isolate of a vase is the opposite of a non-vase. So what is a non-vase? Let's say this is a vase or vase. Opposite of it is everything else that exists in the universe other than this. And then the reverse from that comes back to the vase itself, right? But in Tibetan we say bumpa mayimpa le lokpa.
Right. So
Mayimpa,
Geshe is reading it as Ba Min, not Ba Men.
right? Ba min, and that's the Tibetan that I have. Do you have ba men?
I have Ba Men.
Okay, which I haven't been able to find anywhere in Locus Chandra's Sanskrit English dictionary. Ba min, he has. Oh no, he has ba me. He doesn't have ba min at all. He has ba me as some other word. But anyway, I think Geshe Zopa's translation makes sense because min is the same as mayimpa. So ba mayimpa would be ba min. Paul, which manuscript are you looking at that says men, ba men?
Uh,
Something that's been input or the actual pecha?
is something that's been input, but presumably, let me think. This is Tsong Khapa, so it would be the Lhasa Sholparkang printing.
Okay.
But actually, I just searched not Lokesh Chandra, but Nagy, which was and he does have an entry for Ba Men as Gavya.
That's the same word that is
Yeah.
in the guess for what the Sanskrit is.
Right,
But
right.
whether
But that
that
actually occurs in a manuscript. So that's in that's in Shantarakshita's no, it's in Kamalashila's Tattva Samgraha Panjika.
okay.
So there does seem to be some Sanskrit that
So
means Gavya.
there is a source for translating Bam men as Gael.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So but Geshe Zopa when he taught it, he said, let's see if I have his actual words here. the presence of a non-cow, such as a horse. Okay. So what is a non-cow? So he's taking ba min as just being ba ma yinpa. But as Paul says, there's reason to believe that that's a misprint in the text, and that the ba men is referring to this other cow-like creature, but it's not a cow. It's like a cow, but it's not a cow. Or as Paul said, maybe like the difference between a so the difference between a cow and a yak is quite distinct, right? Is that right? Oh no, no. What do they don't, what is it? What is it?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So
between a buffalo and a
yeah, something
Water
like that.
buffalo.
Yeah.
water
Like,
buffalo and a yak. So
yeah.
water buffalo's, a different kind of animal than a yak. But if they are possible, they can give birth to animals, and those animals are called ze. Are they just only one gender, Paul, or can they be both?
I don't know. I was thinking maybe the analogy is like a mule, which is like between a horse and a donkey. You
Right.
get a mule, but a mule is sterile. It can't reproduce.
Zero. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. The so
If
Yeah.
I may, I think I found something. I mean, in the Pögyat Shenmo, there is an entry for ba men with a trengbu.
okay. And what does
And
it
the
say?
definition is palong drawe ridakshik. So ridak is a deer. So it's a
A
deer
small animal. Yeah, a small animal with a horn. Yeah,
which looks like a palong, a cow.
which looks like some kind of cattle.
Yeah, I think deer is wrong. I think in fact there's an entry in Monier Williams that literally says for Gayal, it says erroneously classified by Hindu writers as a species of deer.
It's ridak.
Yeah. And so I'm saying that I think the Chinese just picked that up, or maybe the Tibetans picked that up from a Hindu source.
Okay, so let's get back to the actual essence here. So those of you who are not interested so much in the grammar, so Geshe took this bamin or bamen as a non-cow. Okay, so he said the presence of a non-cow, such as a horse, does not ensure an uninterrupted family lineage of a cow after the cow's death. So when a cow dies, its family lineage, does that continue after the death of the cow?
If it
We're not
had a
talking about
calf,
a birth situation, we're talking about a death situation here. When a cow dies, yeah, KT, the cow dies, does its lineage continue? Does its family lineage continue? Or the continuity of its type, does that continue after its death?
I think, yes, that's what we're trying to discover here, or talk about the lineage and the continuum.
So
it would need a calf, right?
no,
Why
we're
not?
talking about the actual death of the cow, right?
So that distinct entity isn't there. The entity of that cow no longer exists as an entity, but somehow there's the link in the continuum into its
Right.
offspring.
Say for instance, when you had the seed and the sprout, right? There is the seed is destroyed, but its continuity from the Prasangika point of view continues into the sprout. So this whole concept of continuity of something which has ceased is the basis for one of the uncommon Prasangika precepts that karmic actions, even when they finish, like before I was talking about giving, when the action of giving is finished, that is shikpa, that is disintegrated, that action, it still is a compounded phenomena. It doesn't just stop. It can have ramifications after that.
Culture fodder.
So in that way, hold on, in that way, karma doesn't have to have a particular location where it is deposited. Chandrakirti said that the karma, when an action is done, when a karma has done, and you have the completion of the action, there's a shikpa, there is a disintegratedness of that action. That itself is still a compounded phenomena. It can have ramifications in the future, and when those karmic events ripen, that's the manifestation of that disintegrated action. Let me look at your eyes. Making sense? Snehi, no?
It's like the cow becoming vulture fodder, right?
No, it's not like that.
Well, that's the continuum of the cow becomes something else, right? It's still there. It
The
just becomes
continuum of the
something.
cow. When the cow dies, maybe the cow, the mind stream that was the cow, then next life becomes a man or a god, or it doesn't necessarily become a cow again, right? When the cow dies, right? There's no continuity of the cow. The existence of something which is completely distinct from a cow, a non-cow, like a horse. If a horse was present there in the same way that a sprout is present when a seed is ceasing, but here, and if you assume that the sprout and the seed are inherently different, why is that any different than a horse, which is inherently different than the dying cow, that's in the process of dying? That can't appear. The continuity of that can't appear within the non-cow in the horse.
But wouldn't it also apply to non-self phenomenon, like the cow's body becoming food for the vulture?
We're not worried about that. Not worried about that. We're using these examples. So illustrations are examples. Here in Tibetan it says perna, which in Tibetan means for example. Usually illustration means something a little bit different, or you could say that kind of here.
Venerable George, that's what I'm wondering if maybe if this bomb men is sort of like the offspring of a cow and whatever
Right.
a yak, then I'm wondering if it's literally like the cow that is the mother of the bomb men when that cow dies.
I think this is to illustrate this original fact about the seed and the sprout, Paul.
Right. But I'm saying that way you have a connection, a causal connection between the cow as the mother of the Bamen. That's why I was wondering if they were doing
Right, but
that analogy.
That could be. It's something to think about. My first thought is that that's not what's happening here, but it could be. Good thought. So I will also think about that a little bit. So let me read you again what Geshe Zopa said. The presence of a non-cow, and like he was using like a horse, or as Paul is saying, maybe you could say like a zoe, which was actually the offspring of that mother. That's another story. The presence of a non-cow does not ensure an uninterrupted family lineage of the cow after death. The existence of non-cows do not benefit or contribute to not ceasing the family lineage of the cows through death. So there's different ways of translating that. So generally speaking, when we talked about the sprout, the presence of the sprout does benefit the continuity of the seed after the seed is destroyed. There's some kind of continuity after that shikpa, after its destruction. it doesn't mean that it is no longer exists whatsoever and has no future consequences. Even an action that is finished, the finishing of the action itself is what propels the karmic events in the future, just the existence of that. So, Snehi, you haven't heard of this before, right?
No.
Okay, so it's going to be coming in the future, not so far in the future when we talk about the uncommon prasangika, points of view. One of them is that shikpa, that disintegratedness is a compounded phenomena, that once something has ceased like that, like the seed is ceased, it still has some staying power, so to speak. But it's the seed, the continuity of the seed that exists as a result of the sprout is not one with the sprout, not inherently one with the sprout. It's not inherently different than the sprout, but it still exists there. Okay, let's leave that for a second. So,
Venerable George, I have a question.
Yes.
Would this make sense that if there, I mean, to go to the negative, if there were not a continuum, then it would have to be inherently existent or independently existent. And it's the continuum in some form or other that ensures that it's not inherently existent.
It doesn't have to ensure that it's not inherent. Inherent existence doesn't exist at all. So you don't have to worry about having some.
No. But I'm saying that when we see something as inherent, we just see it as inherently existent. If we understand that it's not inherently, if it were inherently existent, it couldn't continue.
Mhm.
However, if it is not inherently existent, it has to have a way of continuing. So we have to find the way.
Why would it have to have a way to continue? Maybe you could just stop.
Well, then it's independently existent if you just stop.
So if a train crashes into a wall and stops, doesn't that stop? Continuity of that motion? Anyway, that's
but we're not talking
thinking,
about, I mean,
that's a little off to the side. Let's leave that for a while. Just let me finish this before Mintu has a chance. It said, Jimpa's translated, to illustrate the presence of a cow-like beast in no way ensures the non-cessation of the cow's lineage after death. In no way ensures the non-cessation of the cow's lineage after death. So the cow has died in analogy to the seed ceasing and having its continuity in the sprout. If the sprout were inherently other than the seed, it couldn't. The seed couldn't be in there. Its continuity couldn't be related with that sprout. Here, if you talk about something that's different than the dying cow, such as a horse or a zoo or something like that, if they were inherently different, here, how does it say here? To illustrate, the presence of a cow-like beast in no way ensures the non-cessation of a cow's lineage after death. So no way ensures the non-cessation. What does that mean? You could say it almost the same as taking off the two negatives, right? Because it's a double. In no way, it does ensure the cessation of a cow's lineage after death.
Uh,
No. Mikhail.
Yeah, no, yeah, just maybe we could summarize the meaning as just they are not influencing each other. They are not, it's mi penpa, they are not assisting. One is not assisting the other because they are supposedly intrinsically different.
Right. Right. But here we're talking about the cow's lineage after death. So generally what would happen to the cow's lineage after death is that it would cease because there's nothing like a sprout there that's a consequence of the cow's death, right? Mikhail?
Yeah. Yeah, but he's talking about non-cessation.
Yeah. This in no way ensures the non-cessation of the lineage. So what is the non-cessation of the lineage? That means the lineage continues, has a continuity, right? This no way ensures the non-cessation of the lineage. The non-cessation of the lineage. So this no way ensures the continuity of the lineage after death. This
Yeah,
in
whatever happens to the cow is not at all influenced by the cow-like beast.
right,
Because
right,
they are different.
right. They're inherently different. They're different and inherently different in the same way that a seed and a sprout are not inherently different, but are perceived to be inherently different by people. So now the maybe even more tricky one, this is what I said, when I've looked in all sorts of commentaries, I haven't found any commentary about Chandrakirti's explanation using the dying of a cow and a bamin, whether that means a zoo or whether that means a non-cow in general. There's no explanation anywhere. Also of this line, likewise, the presence of ordinary beings in no way ensures Aryas do not sever the continuum of their own cyclic existence. Richard, I thought you were about to break out into a laugh.
It's explaining a simple point in the most difficult way possible.
It seems like
For
that,
me.
doesn't it?
For me, it's pretty obvious. They have nothing to do with each other. The end. Is there anything else that I'm missing in my blunt summary? Because that seems to be what it's saying.
So let's see what Venerable Joan translated that the existence of ordinary beings not contributing, or as Mikhail was saying, not aiding, the existence of ordinary beings not contributing to the non-interruption of the continuities of superiors circling in their own existence. So she's made it more also a little bit more complicated. So non-interruption of the continuity, not contributing not contributing to the non-interruption of the continuity of superiors. So if we take off the two negatives, so the existence of ordinary beings contributing to the interruption of the continuity of superiors circling in cyclic existence, in their own existence. Does that make sense? Does that make any more sense? What's being talked about here? We're talking about continuities. So when you talk about a substance like clay, wet clay becoming molded by the potter, baked, or whatever the word is, the right word for potting, then coming out with a fixed thing. There is a continuity of that clay, of the wet clay, although it's no longer in the form of wet clay, it's dry clay now. When the seed is destroyed, there still is some continuity of the seed existing with the sprout, but it is not inherently, that continuity is not inherently one with the sprout, is not inherently different than the sprout. So now we're talking, and then we talked about the when a cow dies, is there a continuity of the cow's lineage? Usually there's no continuity of the cow's lineage after death, right? It just ceases. The presence of something else that might be the equivalent of the sprout, where you could say that the continuity of the cow lineage continues in that, that is completely different. Say, for instance, the presence of a non-cow or a zoe or whatever is not going to be any receptacle for that continuity to arise with. Doris, what do you think? Was that a kind of question, Mudra? No?
I'm not sure what it was, but something happened. I
Okay.
don't know.
Okay.
Club.
Good. Mikhail, what are you thinking? It was all very simple?
No, it's not simple at all.
There are some tricky questions, but in one way. So why are we talking about this at all? We're originally, the actual verse was talking about 33. Because the sprout is not other than the seed, there is no extinction of the seed at the time of the sprout. Because they're not inherently other, there can be a continuity of the seed at the time of the sprout. There's no extinction of the seed at the time of the sprout. And because the sprout and the seed are not identical, it cannot be said that seed exists when the sprout is there. Okay, that's what we're talking about. So let's continue a little bit further. So as Snehi had mentioned, this note 476 in Jimpa's text, she said she thought this was a good synopsis of this point. So let's read this now that we've reached that point. Both examples, the example of what? What are the two examples? One is the cow and the zoe, and one example is ordinary beings and Arya beings, right? For example, both examples are drawn from Chandrakirti's commentary. So this is not some example that Lama Tsongkhapa made up. These illustrations or examples. The point is that conventionally speaking, when a seed produces a sprout, although the seed itself comes to cease, there is a shikpa of that, or a gyun chepa. Its continuum remains as the sprout it has produced. He says its continuum remains as the sprout it has produced. That kind of makes sense, right? But if the two are intrinsically, the fact that they are not inherently different, they're not inherently the same, that's the actual truth. But if the two were intrinsically different, intrinsically distinct, or inherently different entities, they will be no different from other totally unconnected entities, like a yak and a cow. They have no they have no, relationship in terms of transforming from one into the other, or the continuity of one being the other. They'd be no different from other totally unconnected entities like a yak and a cow, or two distinct persons, such as an ordinary person, that means a non-Arya, and an Arya. The existence of the sprout in that case would have nothing to do with the continuum of the seed. So this is just talking about a hypothetical. If they were inherently different, there could be no continuity at that point. Okay, let's just read a little bit further here, and we'll continue next time. So the text continues, because there is no contradiction for the seed and the sprout to be cause and effect, even when the sprout is not intrinsically other than the seed, there is no extinction of the lineage of the seed at the time of the sprout. In this way, one avoids the extreme of annihilationism. So annihilationism, or annihilation, one of the extremes of annihilation means that, when they ask the Buddha, when the Buddha dies, when the Tathagata dies, does he continue or does he cease? So if you said he ceases, that would be kind of a sense of annihilation, that at that point, there's no longer a Tathagata at all, right? So one avoids the extreme of saying this state of annihilation. Annihilation would be, a state of annihilation would be that the seed just ceases then and there's no continuity of it afterwards. So read that sentence again. Because there is no contradiction for the seed and the sprout to be cause and effect, even when the sprout is not intrinsically other than the seed. So even when, the very fact is that the seed and the sprout are not intrinsically, not inherently other. So if that's the case, there's no extinction of the lineage of the seed at the time of the sprout. There's some continuity of the seed that exists as the sprout at the time of the sprout. In this way, one avoids the extreme of annihilationism. Making sense? So you can go back and read from the beginning, this section. Every time you read, it becomes a little clearer. It has on numerous occasions been explained that the seed comes to cease at the time of the sprout. Okay, what ceases? The actual seed itself. But there is a continuity of the seed that's different than the seeds. Let's say, it has on numerous occasions been explained that the seed comes to cease at the time of the sprout. And the meaning of seed's extinction has been explained in the commentary. That means Chandrakirti's Bhashyam, auto-commentary. It has been, the meaning of the seed's extinction has been explained in the commentary as the termination of its continuity. Since it is explained many times, I'm reading Joan here, but it has been explained many times that at the time of the sprout, the seed has ceased. So this is Nyugu Dusu, Sabon Gakpala Lenmangdu Shepe. So here the ceasing is talking about the word Gakpa related with Gokpa, like Gokten, the truth of cessation. This is not talking about Shikpa. It's just saying that it's just ceased in the ordinary sense. The commentary explains the meaning of the state of disintegration, Sabon Shikpe Don, So now it's using disintegration as Shikpa, as Snehi had remembered reading somewhere that Shikpa is sometimes called non-disintegratedness or something like that, or disintegratedness, right? Disintegratedness. So Sabon Shikbedon, the meaning of the disintegration or the Shikpa of the seed, to be the continuity of the seed. Since it has been explained many times that at the time of the sprout, the seed has ceased, the commentary explains the meaning of the state of disintegration of the seed to be the continuity of the seed has been interrupted, and says that the non-disintegration of the seed is refuted. Therefore, saying the continuity of the seed has been interrupted is asserted to mean that the continuity of its type has been interrupted. Okay, so now we're getting into some deep grass here. So we're going to stop there with that sentence that goes up to note 477. Let's just see what 477 says. That just gives the point in the commentary text in the Tibetan. So that's where we'll start next time, right after note 477, or we will review that. Mintu, you've been patiently holding your iconic hand there. I hope it didn't get drained of blood. What do you like to say?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the example of the seed and the sprout, you know? So basically, the seed and the sprout, we can say that in some way, you know, the actual form itself, there is no, like, there is no, they're not the same, they're not different. But can you say that, can we say that the seed and the sprout are linked to it sameness, you know, the continuity by its DNA, like, you know, because they share the same DNA, and so the seed of a watermelon become a watermelon because it has the DNA of the watermelon. And so we can say that the similar logic can apply to a cow too, you know, even though the cow is dead, but as long as its DNA survive in some way, we can still clone the cow. The cow, for example, if let's say, you know, it died in Siberia, then it was frozen in the frost, then, you know, 1,000 years later, we can still, you know, thaw the cow and then, you know, clone the cow by using its DNA. So basically, I'm saying that we can
talking about the Santa Clara Jurassic Park, right?
yeah, something like that. So, you know, yeah.
Okay, something to think about. Yeah. The fact that the DNA of the seed continues in the DNA of the sprout. Is that true? Where's Sean? Sean, yeah, okay. Yeah, maybe you could say that, yeah, that's kind of similar to saying that the continuity of the seed exists, but it is not inherently one with the seed, and it is not inherently different than the seed. It is somehow in the DNA of the seed. Yeah, that's an interesting way of thinking about it.
Well, that's why in the example with the cow, it needed to have an offspring, because otherwise the example is not the same.
Yeah, it's not the same as that example. It's another example. The two examples are not meant to be redundant. They're talking about different cases. One where there's a continuity, and one where there's not. Okay.
Well, I think it also gets confusing because these terms like lineage, you have to specify, well, what kind of lineage are you talking about?
Right.
You're talking about the lineage of the cow's mental continuum versus the lineage of the cow as a species.
No, I'm not talking about the continuum. I'm saying if you were to think that, that continuum is no longer a cow, right? There's not a continuum
Sure. Okay.
of cowness in that lineage. there is a continuum of the cow's mind stream, but at that point, if you just looked at that, you wouldn't necessarily say it was a cow before. There's nothing cowness about it. Okay,
Yeah.
this is a little.
Also,
Go on.
also, I think that in Tibet there are some instances of zombie, right? So basically, they say that they're like dead body, and somehow, you know, the evil spirit or whatever thing can enter the body of some disease thing, and then they can actually be.
Yeah.
be
Okay. Yeah. You love these kind of things, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Those
basically,
are called in Tibetan. We say rolang is one of the terms. Mikhail or Paul, are there other terms in Tibetan?
I
Ro
think Roland. Yeah.
Long means standing
Yeah, standing corpse. Yeah.
standing corpse, something like that. So yeah, there's stories about that, but that's not so relevant to what we're talking about here. That's another mind stream animating that corpse generally. You know, so what person has died or animal has died, and that mind stream has left, but the body is still serviceable. It's kind of like when you go to the meat market, you know, the meat is still kind of fresh. If you leave it out for a long time, it starts to rot, right? So the body is still not started to decompose, and another mind stream can enter into that and animate that if you have a particular kind of karmic connection with that being and the ability to transfer your consciousness into it. That's one of the 6 yogas of Naropa that Sean is studying. Okay. So Snehi, how are you doing? Any questions?
I mean, many questions, but for now, I'm good.
Okay. I guess we lost Don somewhere along the line. Well, if there's one that's kind of perplexing, let's get it open. Let's open that wound. Pull off the bandage. Snehi. If you have one.
No,
Yeah.
it's to, you know, you said we would get to it later, which is, you know, this whole concept of disintegratedness. And
Yeah.
you were saying that for Prasangika, you know, they make this argument in order to say that, you know, imprints don't have to belong somewhere like Yogacara does. And so
Not imprints, seeds, sabon.
yeah.
Yeah, they don't like they say carbon. We say karmic seeds, right? Usually, we say when you create a karma, that karma is finished, but it continues on as a seed. And that seed, then the question is, where is that deposited? So the different tenets, especially the lower tenets, have different places. Usually, it has something to do with the mind or the mental consciousness or the continuum of the mental consciousness. So it remains there and it's still changing because karma is changeable, right? It can increase in its intensity or it can diminish if you're doing purification and so forth. But that requires a certain location to deposit the seed. Whereas for the Prasangika, they say there's no need to deposit, as the Chittamatra do very prominently, the alaya vijnana, right? Is that the place where the seeds are deposited, the fundamental alaya vijnana, fundamental mind, something like that. So Prasangika says the very fact when the karma finished, you don't have to say it produced a seed that has to be deposited somewhere. It just continues on. It is a compounded phenomena. So usually when you have a cessation of something, that is an uncompounded phenomena, right? Cessation is uncompounded, is permanent. Whereas this kind of shikpa, disintegratedness, is a compounded phenomena, and it can have ramifications of its own in the future, even though it's not deposited anywhere. So that's kind of a tough cup of tea to drink, whereas when you actually ask, when I asked Kirti Senchab Rinpoche, one of my teachers who was teaching Tantra at the time, I asked him, in Tantra, is it any different? Where is there a location for the subtlemost karmic seeds? And he said, yeah, it's the subtlemost mind and wind. So it's Chandrakirti wasn't saying that you can't think of the that it makes no sense to use the analogy of a seed. He was talking just about the sutra path, but in the tantra path, when you talk about something that does continue on, the subtlemost mind and wind, right? That's different than the mind and wind, the gross mind and wind, or the gross ala vijnana that the Chittamatra is talking about. That will be a how to say? I think they say that continues on, but maybe you could say that that's similar to the subtlemost mind and wind of highest yoga tantra. Anyway, Kirti Senchab Rinpoche said that you can say, you don't have to say that it's all shikpa. You can say that there's some kind of, that maybe the shikpa itself in the form of a seed or a potential is deposited within the subtlemost mind and wind, and therefore that will continue on to future lifetimes. Okay, anyway, these are all questions that if you debate with some geshes, maybe they will have some fun debating with you, asking these questions. Okay, so we'll have a discussion group on Monday. If I don't have an operation by then, I'm supposed to have an operation to remove this big kidney stone, which was the doctor was in there with the scope. I could see it also on the screen. He said, "It's a rock. Oh, you've got a rock." Not a nice spherical stone. So he wasn't able to pull it out that time. So I'm going to have to go in for an operation. So provided I don't have an operation on Monday, I'll see you then and next Saturday. Let's finish with some dedication prayers because we've accumulated lots of merit and wisdom and perseverance and patience in trying to understand this complicated subject. Due to these virtues, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha and lead all migrators without exception into that enlightened state, or into that very same state. May the supreme precious bodhicitta that has not arisen in my mind or in others' minds, may that arise and grow as a result of these merits. And may that which has arisen in my mind and in the minds of others not diminish, but increase more and more. And for the swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, who knows how soon, peerless teacher and assembly of children of the conquerors, Shravakas, Pratika Buddhas, victorious Losang father and sons, together with your lineage, all objects of refuge of the infinite realms, please now bestow the virtue and goodness to accomplish this prayer. In upholding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you, Lama Zopa, wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable venerable Guru, to you I make request. You are the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge. And while striving exclusively for the welfare of the conqueror's teachings and for the welfare of mother living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. At that point, I lost hope. Nonetheless, through the undeceiving truths of the oceanic blessings of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the bodhisattvas, may the smile of a new reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for us fortunate disciples. And then to all of our spiritual guides, our primordial gurus that we've met again and again over many, many lifetimes. You who are my eyes for viewing all the infinite scriptures, supreme gateways for the fortunate ones traveling to liberation, engaging with skillful means, moved by mercy, illuminating spiritual friends, I make this request. Please live long and stable lives. Okay, thank you for your perseverance. Look forward to seeing some of you on Monday, and hoping I will be a new man. There will be a cessation of my kidney stones soon. Okay, take care.
Thank you so much, Venerable
Thank you,
George.
Venerable George.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Venerable
Wish you
Thank
the
you.
best.